Okay, I'm going to do another reaction video to Scott Ritter, and this one's going to be a bit different because, well, he seems to be almost flipping maybe. Let's see, but the last reaction video I shot here, which is in front of the grave of William Joyce, who's better known as Lord Haw Haw. Now, in short, he was a Nazi propagandist during the Second World War. He was actually born in America, grew up here in the west coast of Ireland, then went to England, joined the British Union of Fascists, and then when the Second World War started, he fled to Nazi Germany and eventually got a job working kind of on their radio program, and he took on the moniker Lord Haw Haw, and he would relay Nazi propaganda to undermine British morale during the Second World War. Now, many commenters under that video said, well, Lord Haw Haw, he would have been supporting Ukraine and all those Ukrainian Nazis. Lord Haw Haw was a committed fascist and worked for Nazi Germany. Do you think he would have been supporting a government led by a democratic elected Jew like Volodymyr Zelensky? You think he would have been supporting that? I find it very unlikely. And yes, it's true that Nazi ideology saw Russians as Untermenschen, like subhumans, but they also saw Ukrainians as subhumans as well, all Slavs. So I think they would have been he probably would have been split on that. But Russia's a revanchist autocracy trying to spread west at the moment. I guess at that time he was campaigning for Germany to spread both west and east. But if you're around today, my contention is he would have been cheering on Russia in this war. Anyways, let's get into another interesting reaction video to Scott Ritter. Поехали.
Tsar Experience.
So I've done a few reaction videos to Scott Ritter, who's kind of like the superstar of analysts for the Russia's winning crowd in general. And I'll link those above on cards down below in the description. I reacted to day one where he was saying that he would eat his tie if the valiant Ukrainians were resisting on day 10 somewhere around Dnipro, the city, in the center of Ukraine. Then on day 49, he was saying that we would see 5 to 10,000 daily Ukrainian POWs in the following days. So you can see his track record. I'm filming this video. It's day 112 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the February 24th invasion, 2022. And in the last reaction video, he was basically hating on Finland to almost the same extent as he hates on Ukraine, Ukrainian culture, the Ukrainian people, as he does in all his other videos or interviews that we see on this kind of alternative Western media here on YouTube. We'll say speaking to people from the West. Now, what's really interesting is occasionally he does an article somewhere or he gives an interview to someone a bit different and he tells a completely different story. So this is a video from about, I'd say at this stage, about 10 days ago, maybe a week, 10 days ago. This is before Vladimir Putin gave his informal talk in front of, I think it was in St. Petersburg, to a group of students where he basically just openly said, "Это империализма, детка." It's just imperialism, baby. And stopped all the kind of excuses about Nazis and biolabs and NATO expansion and we're there to save the people of Donbass from a genocide. He kind of dropped all that, those excuses, that whole, I guess, propaganda narrative that most of these people who are in this kind of like Lord Haw Haw / useful idiot category have repeated ad nauseum for the last 110 odd days. And this is just before that new memo, I guess, for all the propagandas. Hey, we don't need to pretend anymore. So he is speaking to a Russian vlogger, and let's see what he says. It's very interesting.
Do they work? Maybe. Maybe some of them work, some of them don't. It only takes one to kill a Russian soldier, though. And Russia needs to understand that Ukraine right now is not in the business of achieving an operational victory on the battlefield. They don't have the capability to outfight and outmaneuver the Russian army. What the Ukrainian army is in the business of doing is killing Russian soldiers. Their job right now is to kill as many Russian soldiers as possible, to drag this conflict out as long as possible so that Russia fails to achieve its political objectives.
Is this Scott Ritter or is this me speaking now? I'm a bit confused. Am I looking in the mirror? I call this war on day 30 on my channel because I don't see how Russia can win. And that's the reason. The Ukrainians have resisted already long enough back on day 20, 21, which is when there was kind of high water point of Russia occupying territory because they had all this territory in the north around Kiev, around Chernihiv, around Sumy that they retreated from, also a little bit in the south around Mykolaiv. Now they have taken some more territory from Ukraine in the Donbas region. They also lost a little bit near Kharkiv. But basically since then, I don't see how Russia can win. They cannot achieve their political goals. And that's been basically the strategy from the Ukrainians on day one at least, was let's try to survive, right? And if Ukraine survives, then kind of they win basically. Now, I'd like to add two caveats to when I made that video on day 30. Obviously, if Russia just decides to nuke all of Ukraine and completely destroy it and make it a nuclear holocaust, then obviously I don't really know if we can say Russia's won. Well, definitely Ukraine has lost. And number two, if they successfully committed genocide in Ukraine, having occupied all of the territory, but that seems a long way off, around day 112. Remember, Scott Ritter on day one saying that it wouldn't last 10 days. He'd eat his tie, he still didn't eat his tie on camera. So definitely at this rate, it's not looking like they're going to win military, but it's interesting to hear Scott Ritter say this out loud.
Russia won't lose this war because it lost battles. Ukraine won't win this war because it won battles. Russia will lose this war because it didn't defeat Ukraine. And Ukraine will win this war if they don't lose to Russia.
That's been obvious since day one. I think it's just in the last maybe, since Russia retreated out of the north of Ukraine, a lot of the narrative is going, well, can they just push them completely back out of everything, out of all of Donbass, out of Crimea, and go back to de jure borders, the legal borders of Ukraine? It's kind of lost sight of what the real battle is. So yeah, I agree with Scott Ritter for once.
And these new weapon systems are, create the potential for the price being asked of the Russian military to achieve a victory beyond that required for the special military operation.
So you see why these weapon systems, the more material Ukraine is given by the West, is so important, because it's going to prevent Russia from achieving its political goals. And that's why you see so much resistance for those people who are cheering for Russia in general, is because they don't want them to get the weapons. They keep saying, oh, it's over, please, Ukraine has to be made surrender, because otherwise Russia is going to lose.
Beyond the liberation of Donbass, beyond the Mariupol land bridge, beyond the Kherson water district, to go beyond that, to take Odessa, to take Kharkiv, to take Pavlograd, I guess it's Dnipropetrovsk now.
No, it's called Dnipro, but that's fine. That's just a little bit of a mistake.
How do you denazify Ukraine without taking Lvov and blowing up the statue of Stepan Bandera?
You see how far he wanted to go. I mean, on day one, he was boasting about how, did he say millions or a million? Well, a large number of Ukrainians would basically be refugees, and that their descendants wouldn't even be coming back to Ukraine. He was so gung-ho that they would crush and destroy those Ukrainians, get rid of Ukraine. And now he realizes on day, well, this was probably about day 105-ish, that yeah, that's not going to happen.
Does Russia have the military capacity to do this if the casualties that are being inflicted on it are of an order of magnitude higher than they would be if Ukraine wasn't receiving these modern weapons? And again, I'm not trying to predict the future.
I'm glad he's starting to give up on that.
But I think it's accurate to say that the game has changed, that the military situation that exists in Ukraine today is far different than the military situation that existed when the special military operation began.
Well, that's clear, because the Ukraine army is getting more and more weapons, and they've resisted a lot longer than anyone would have imagined at the beginning. At least when I was watching the mainstream media, they were basically talking in terms of days of Ukraine surviving, and that Kiev would fall. And people tend to forget that now that we're on day 112, is that, around day 10, people are still talking about Kiev being occupied by Russia. So let's see. There we have the mission, basically. Russia's losing, and in the meantime, we've had that spiel, that speech from Vladimir Putin that, yeah, it's all about imperialism. wants to be like Peter the Great. They're taking back the land that's really theirs. It's, you know, just standard imperialist narrative. So we don't really have to go through all this BS about Nazis and whatever in Ukraine. And he's gonna stop saying Russia's winning, right? Right, Scott Ritter? Oh my! He goes back on the usual suspects. So Redacted is hosted by Natalie and Clayton Morris. They used to be mainstream media, and yeah, well, now they're not. Now they're a different type of media, but using a lot of the tactics, I would say. So they're all very conspiratorial in the sense that the mainstream media is hiding the truth from you. Anyways, let's see what Scott Ritter says on their show. So the title of this is "The Truth is Coming Out in Ukraine," and Zelensky is furious.
Something I've been pointing out from day one. You know, the Ukrainians started with one of the largest armies in Europe, one of the most well-equipped armies in Europe, and they're fighting another very large army, very well-equipped army, and now we come down to just the brutality of military math, and it's about death and destruction.
So now he's changed his tone completely from day one, where he was basically saying they're going to be wiped out within a week or so, to like they were apparently one of the best armies in Europe. Huh. Interesting change of tone from Scott Ritter in day 110, 111.
So we don't know anything about military strategy, but we do know about media spin on military strategy. So
Natalie Morris laying it bare there.
So it seemed like around February, we were told, Ukraine, they can do this. They're scrappy. They are going to rise up and push back Russia, and this will be an easy get.
What planet is Natalie Morris living on? Back in February, who was saying that it was going to be easy for Ukraine? They're just going to push the Russians back out. No one, I didn't hear anyone say that, but apparently Natalie Morris has really spun this to mean that the mainstream media was saying that, they'll kick out those Russians. No, they weren't. They were saying Kiev was going to fall within hours or days or whatever.
Well, the Western media has always led with what it wanted. First of all, it never started with parity. It actually started with a 3-to-1 advantage on the part of the Ukrainians.
Wow.
Wow. You know, the Russians came in with say 200,000 troops, and Ukraine, had 600,000 available. Ukraine had numerical superiority, etc.
So now he's completely flipped it. He's saying, well, actually, the Ukrainians, it's almost saying like they had the advantage in the beginning. Really, Scott Ritter, then why were you saying in day one they were going to last no longer than 10 days and you would eat your tie? And he never ate his tie because he's not a man of honor. Be honorable, Scott Ritter. Warm welcome. Again, another invite. Come on to the channel. We'll do a video. You can eat your tie.
It's ugly. It's disgusting. It stinks. That's war. And the Russians are waging it more brutally effective than the Ukrainians can sustain it.
Again, he's just contradicting what he said to the Russian blogger. So what he's doing is playing to his audience. Like he's not invited on Redacted to say that, well, Russia's losing. He's invited on to say Russia's winning. That's why he's invited on these channels, and that's why they get so many views, is because their audience want to believe that Russia will win. They will crush those Ukrainians and kill them, and Russia will win, and then it will go on and destroy the West.
The West didn't understand the Russian plan. They said, oh my God, they're trying to capture Kiev. Russia was never trying to capture Kiev.
This guy is making it up so much for his audience. You just have to go back and look at what he said in day one. I guess losing the Moskva, their flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, that was part of the genius plan. Really, Scott Ritter?
Ukrainians are getting slaughtered. Probably right now they've admitted that it's around 200 dead a day.
Yes.
I'll tell you right now that number's closer to 600 to 800 dead a day. 600 to 800 guys dead.
So there he claims that the Ukrainians are only 600 to 800 dead. That would mean that probably if we say that, the injured is going to be double that, just as a benchmark. He's basically trying to say that Ukraine is losing about 3,000. Is he saying 3,000? But at least 2,000 personnel per day. So it would mean that they're losing about 60,000 a month. He doesn't explain how he comes up with this figure. Did the Russians tell him that they think that they're losing? That's probably, if you extrapolate out of that figure, 150 to 200 killed per day for the Ukrainians, then it's going to be about that 600 to 800 probably in total casualties. So missing in action, wounded in action, and killed in action. How am I supposed to know? How are you supposed to know exactly what the figures are? Russia doesn't publish any figures, but he's just kind of pulled a figure out of nowhere and not given an explanation why he thinks that.
Well, then what were we as Americans supposed to do? Just let Putin come in and take this region to himself? Can you sort of respond to that? I mean, there's the one side that's like, hey, we just need to come in and keep control of, the firepower. And then there's the other argument, which is, what did we really need to do here?
So that's actually a good question for Vitaly Morris. I'm in shock here almost. Let's see how Scott Ritter responds. So Scott, what should they have done?
Well, I don't know. What I would advise every American to do is go visit a cemetery, a World War II cemetery, and kneel at the graves of the men and who lost their lives on in the European theater.
What? So his advice for what should have been done by the West of the war is to go to World War II cemeteries and kneel at the graves of those who fell to save Europe from maniacal, genocidal dictator that murdered millions of people, and do nothing. Why stop Russia winning? But now, unfortunately, as you saw when he spoke to the Russian blogger, Russia is losing. But he doesn't want to admit it to his core audience because, they're not going to invite him on if he doesn't keep up the message.
I want to take a look at your article that you just released today, specifically on using Russians as cannon fodder, basically. Maybe I have that phrased wrong, but this is your piece today that you wrote on the U.S. is trying to use Ukraine as a test lab.
No, it's a different type of lab. It's not a biolab, it's a test lab, and they're killing Russians as cannon fodder. I mean, it's just so... I don't know. Let's go ahead and see what he says next.
They're seeking to use these four as a test bed to test out new technologies, new techniques, new procedures, which means that Ukraine has become a research and development playground. And that's fine if you're only using computers in theory. But this is a playground where Ukrainians and Russians are in a life and death struggle. And it's a struggle that Ukrainians are being slaughtered at a rate of 20-1 to the Russians, but Russians are still dying. So you're bringing in a tool whose sole purpose is to kill Russians in a war where killing Russians will not change the outcome. How brutally cynical can you be to do that?
Hold on. That completely contradicts what he said to the Russian blogger. He said the whole thing is that they are killing Russians and it means Russia's losing at the end of the day. You see, he's just a big hypocrite. He's just like whoever played to the audience. What do they want to hear? I don't really know if the Russian blogger wanted to hear that, but he gave a more honest appraisal there, it seems. Now he's just contradicting himself. But one thing that I think just is good for a mindset evaluation is that, he talks about the justifications for the war.
You understand the law and sometimes how words have meaning.
Yeah.
A special military operation is not war. If this were a war, all's fair. Ukraine, you want to hit us? We hit you? Fine. It's not a war.
Yes, it's a war. Like, just because Russia decided to make up this term, special military operation, doesn't mean that it's a special military operation. It's obviously a war and an invasion, and it's obviously illegal.
This is Russia's special military operation designed to punish Ukraine for its criminal activities in the Donbass for the past 8 years.
So he repeats about their criminal to punish them. He's like saying, they're like a policeman coming in to grab the aggressor.
Ukraine doesn't have the right. Ukraine doesn't have the right to strike Russia.
Doesn't have the right to strike Russia? See how he sets it up. Russia has the right to just invade Ukraine, destroy it, kill its people, commit a genocide. It has the right to do it because, well, he thinks that that's just and that Ukrainians aren't worth anything. But then Ukrainians strike back and blow up military targets within Russia? No, that's criminal, according to Scott Ritter.
You don't. Just like a criminal gang with the cops coming at them, what, you're going to attack the police station? They'd expect the cops not to triple down? So Russia's told Ukraine, you don't get to hit us.
See how he says they're in the wrong defending themselves? This guy, this is just a disgusting human being, let's be honest about it. And when you Google his name and find out his criminal background, you'll understand why it matches up.
I expect to see Russia starting to take out what they call decision-making centers in Kiev. Russia has warned Ukraine not to do this. They said, if you do this, this is a game changer. And now they're going to start killing people.
They're going to start killing people as if they haven't killed. We don't know how many tens of thousands of people have died so far in the war. Maybe it's even up to 100,000. So presumably, as a corollary, he thinks that if Russia just starts killing millions of people, it's just a natural conquest of Ukraine fighting back. It's all justified in the mind of Scott Ritter.
You know, sacrifice in defense of a cause is never futile if you believe that that cause is just and you think you're going to win. I don't happen to believe that the cause of defending Ukraine is just, but I respect those who do.
You don't believe it's just to defend Ukraine by Ukrainians? He just doesn't think they have a right to exist. That's the bottom line. That's what people who are genocidal think.
But if you are simply trying to extend the suffering of a nation, Ukraine, and the sacrifice of a people, the Ukrainians, simply to achieve a political goal of causing Russia pain.
Oh, and he goes on. You see how he reframed what he said to the Russian blogger? Russian blogger said, yeah, if they keep this cost up high enough, then basically Russia will lose, and it is losing. And then he says, no, it's just for a different political goal. It's not to ensure that Russia loses, just to weaken them. So this guy is just so disingenuous. But anyways, I'll end it there because you can watch hours of this idiot making a fool of himself. But I think that illustrates it for the fourth time. But he will be invited back on and on and on. He's probably hoping the war goes on for 300 days because he's relevant to these people, to his audience that can, I guess, I don't know what he gets out of it explicitly, but there you go. So when he talks to Russian blogger, kind of sounds like me all of a sudden, saying that Russia's losing, they cannot achieve their political objectives, even if they were to achieve their military objectives, which they haven't done. They were defeated in Kiev, no matter how he tries to spin it. They were defeated in Kiev, they retreated, and they were defeated near to Mykolaiv. And now they're focusing on a different strategy, which has gone better for them in the last month. They've made some territorial gains, but they haven't taken any big cities since Mariupol, and they're basically destroying everything. So again, what's the long-term plan? Genocide is all I can see, and you see many people in the Russian elite openly talk about basically destroying Ukrainians, destroying them as a people, killing them in effect, basically genocide, and that's what they've basically come up with as a strategy. But when he goes on these channels, he just acts like the performer, the entertainer, he's infotainment for the people who want Russia to win. Anyways, drop a comment down below what you think. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, isn't that the book? Which is Scott Ritter. And Slava Ukraini, something that will really grate on the nerves of people like Scott Ritter, who hate Ukraine so much. He also, in the last video, apparently hates Finland as well for resisting Russian aggression in the past. Harom Slava, and I will see you in the next film. До свидания.
Tsar Experience.